Do you maintain that all arguments that conclude in the existence of God are God of the gaps? That's the first part. What is the difference between a deductive argument concluding in God's existence and a God of the gaps argument? Those are kind of the same thing. What's the difference between a God of the gaps argument and a deductive argument that has an inference that God exists?
Well, they're actually pretty close. First of all, I think the first part of that question is most of it is God of the gaps.
So you're saying that all the arguments that is used in classical theism, such as the ones that Frank mentioned, are God of the gaps.
Well,
I think that's what
ontological, the refutation for the ontological argument is not God of the gaps.
Well, let's just go with the ones that were mentioned, the cosmological, moral, and teleological.
Yes.
Okay. And so you're saying the deductive and the God of the gaps arguments are almost the same.
In order to deduce the existence of God logically, of a God logically, we would have to have a basis. We would have to have a reason to suspect that something that disobeys all known laws of physics exists. Now, we don't have any evidence of anything that disobeys any of the laws of physics that supposed God has. This God supposedly has a whole bunch: omniscience, timelessness, spacelessness, all-powerful. Where does that power come from? We don't have any basis to make the decision that something like that is possible. So to deduce that is not possible. It's all God of the gaps.
Okay.
Hang on.
Follow up.
First of all, the argument, say the cosmological argument is not it is a deductive argument. The argument says whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe had a cause. Now you need to challenge one of the first two premises to refute that argument. By the way, that is a religiously neutral argument. It simply says whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Then we take our reasoning and our philosophical ability to say, okay, if the universe had a cause, what would be the attributes of this cause? We're reasoning from effect to cause. But if those two premises are true, that argument logically and necessarily follows.
No, it does not. It does not follow, because you're positing a being that breaks all known laws of physics. You're going back to where we don't know, and you're saying, I don't know, therefore God did it. That's what the God of the gaps argument is.
David, you don't understand the difference between a deductive argument and the implications of the argument.
Oh, okay. Please enlighten me.
The deductive argument is what I just said, those two premises and a conclusion, okay? Now, the implications of the argument is where we go to try and figure out, okay, what caused the universe?
The God of the gaps is a made-up fallacy. Sounds crazy? Or is it simply true? A YouTuber by the name of Inspiring Philosophy has already made a video about this topic a long time ago, where he demonstrates how many atheists on the internet simply misunderstand how the fallacy works. From its coinage by a Christian evangelist named Henry Drummond, to their failure to understand what the fallacy is trying to point out. I won't be repeating the points raised in that video, so I highly recommend giving that video a watch once you finish this video to the end. In this video, however, I simply want to build upon what Inspiring Philosophy has already said and argue here that the atheist's misunderstanding has gotten so bad that they straight up are no longer talking about the same thing, and hence are completely making up their own fallacy here that simply is a product of their own atheistic assumptions. Don't believe me? Well, let's think about it then. What makes the God of the gaps even a fallacy then? It's actually due to being a variant of the argument from ignorance, meaning it's saying, we don't know, therefore God. However, the arguments for God, also known as natural theology, starts from what we do know and draws out the philosophical implications of theism as a result. Meaning it's saying, we do know X, Y, and Z, therefore God. In other words, the atheists who are abusing the fallacy are doing so out of a fundamental misunderstanding of who created the fallacy, it was by Christians, and what it was intended for, to avoid making arguments from gaps, instead to make them from being itself. But We must question this further. Why are they abusing the fallacy to begin with, to the point where they think any invoking of God as an explanation constitutes a fallacy? I will tell you why. Because they are viewing this from their own prior worldview, and so bring those atheistic assumptions along with them and fallaciously beg the question against the theist. Think of it this way. If they think God as an explanation is somehow inherently a fallacy, then they have simply made up a fallacy that is divorced from its original meaning, that simply begs the question against theism from the get-go. By the way, for those who don't know, begging the question is a fallacy where someone assumes a conclusion in a highly contentious topic rather than argue for it. For example, if someone assumes there is only material composition to our ontology, then God, being an immaterial being, cannot be a proper explanation, and hence must be the result of gaps in our knowledge. And this seems to be exactly how the atheist is reasoning here, whether they admit to it or not, or whether they are even consciously aware of it or not. Many atheists here will simply go on a long rant about how they merely lack belief, blah blah blah, the typical lack theist dodge narrative. But the fact is, if you ask for what they would comfortably include as part of their ontology, it will be indistinguishable from the most ardent naturalist or materialist. And so the narrative here serves to be nothing more than semantics, because when it comes down to it, God would be entirely foreign to their view of ontology. And so naturally, it seems like merely a gap to be explained away later, so that their view of ontology as exclusively composed of material things can be consistent. And so it appears as if a fallacy is present to them by bringing in their assumptions. But the appearance is only that, a mere appearance, not that there's actually any fallacy going on there. Them calling theism a fallacy is just downright absurd, since it simply begs the question to assume a metaphysical paradigm itself that one does not hold to be a fallacy. The exact same scenario flipped around is that if theists make up a fallacy too, called the fallacy of atheism, that is, whenever someone argues for materialism or naturalism, then it is a fallacy, because it is filling in the gaps of our knowledge with natural stuff, when we know it is all created by God. This is the exact same scenario flipped around to the atheist, and perhaps this is the best way to get them to understand why and how they are actually just abusing the fallacy. In any case, we hope you benefited from this video and learned something new. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel as it helps us out in putting out content like this. Thank you all for watching, stay well, and God bless you all.